Can we all agree that we all wish the Firestarter was better than it is? Because, dude, this weapon's so cool, and it kind of just stinks so much. But I wish it didn't stink so much, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you feel me. It's like, look at that, that's so cool, that's such a... It's probably the most unique weapon in this video game. And when it came out, I'm gonna be honest, it was like probably the most underwhelming weapon in this video game. But just because it's underwhelming doesn't mean I hate it. And then it got like the craziest buff, dude. It had like the biggest glow up of all time. It was crazy. Like, does anyone else remember the day the Jumpstarter buff came out, man? That was insane. I mean, we had this weapon that was known for being, you know, a little bit mid, a bit underpowered. You know, something that was shown off in the trailers, and we all looked and collectively went, "Wow, that's really cool! I can't wait to use that." And then we got our hands on it, and we were like, "Wow, that's kind of underwhelming." And then it gets this buff, this just insane buff. You know, the buff that made it explode underwater, the buff that gave it the ability to one-shot Leviathan, one-shot the final room of P2. Also, fun fact about the Firestarter buff. When it first came out, I was in a VC with a guy who was pretty good at speedrunning the game. And I was just messing around with the Firestarter, and I found the tech that like lets you one-shot Leviathan. And now, you know, I'm not going to claim I'm the very first person to discover this, right? But I was definitely one of the first, because I found this tech, and then the guy who actually speedran used it to get a world record, which I just think is kind of funny. There you go. Linguini speedrun tech finder. But, you know, of course, such a weapon couldn't last very long. It was still pretty niche, but it was kind of like disgustingly overpowered in that niche. So they nerfed it, right? Now, when it explodes, it not only has less explosions, but it also explodes only once per enemy. They can only be hit by one explosion. Which I think, I've said this the entire time since the whole year and a bit it's been nerfed. That was an overstep, right? That was a step too far. It didn't need to be nerfed that hard at all. Maybe give it like one of the nerfs, right? Like lower the amount of explosions it has, or make it only hit by one explosion at a time, you know? It didn't need both. But ever since then, it has gone back to being a niche weapon that most people kind of forget about, I feel. Definitely not a bad weapon. It's just probably the most situational weapon in the game. I mean, you're not using the Firestarter to oil up Maurices and shoot them with rockets, are you? There's better ways to kill a Maurice. You're not using a Firestarter to cover the level in fire and chip damage a bunch of smaller enemies down, you know, there's better ways to deal with smaller enemies. What you're probably using the Firestarter on is on a boss, like a Leviathan, Minotaur, Corking Minos, as just like supplementary chip damage. That's probably what you're using this thing for. Definitely doesn't help that when you get a double power-up, you don't get more oil, you just run out of oil 3 times faster, or 2 times faster, depending on how many guns you have. Which I think is weird. But okay. So, you know, this weapon has become a very niche supplementary damage tool, or if you're a speedrunner, a very useful movement tech tool, because you can go a lot faster sliding. I know there's a lot of... I know a couple speedrunners, and I know that very commonly at the end of a level they'll just put some oil down and then slide on it like that, because it's faster, I guess? I'm not a speedrunner, I don't know. But also, I guess, you know, there is always the tech of you can oil up your Insurrectionist and have it take bonus damage for longer, which I know, I think, is the misconception of oil causes things to take more damage still a thing? I know back when this thing first came out, there was a very big misconception That oiling, like putting oil on an enemy would cause it to just take more damage. Very big misconception. Not true. Setting any husk on fire will cause it to take bonus damage. The oil just means they will be on fire for longer. I don't know if that misconception's still like a real thing, but it definitely was. But you know, the fire starter, it does have its use, especially in the cyber grind. I will say it is very useful in the cyber grind. I know people use it all the time because it's just, you know, it's full map coverage. Like, you know, you're covering the entire map on chip damage. It will get rid of the smaller enemies. It will do good damage to larger enemies. There's a lot of enemies on the cyber grind, especially later on. In like later waves, it just kind of gets better and better as time goes on in that thing. So I do know that all of my opinions of the fire starter come from a purely like campaign perspective. I know that the fire starter is really good in speedrunning, and it's really good in the cyber grind. I know, I'm aware. Wow, that guy got blown. However, from a campaign point of view, this thing, yeah, it's kind of niche. It's kind of, you know, you don't use it all the time. It's not the best weapon in the video game. Kind of stinks because it's one of my favorites, man. I like this thing. I think it's cool. I'm not gonna get the soap. Fuck the soap. Soap is lame. So, you know, I wish this thing would get buffed again. I really do. Because I like it. I am biased. However, I don't see it ever getting buffed because it's useful in the other areas of the game. Maybe there could be some kind of rework for it. I think that would be cool. Like, I've thought maybe a cool balancing like thing you could do to make it not like super OP in like cyber grind or speedrunning, but to be better in the campaign is maybe have it so like on tankier enemies, right, depending on their health, the oil will last less time, but it will do more damage faster, you know what I mean? So instead of doing like the 0.5 damage I think it does now, let's say on a beefier enemy like an insurrectionist, it does 1 damage a second but lasts half the time. So it's still the same amount of damage. It's just a more like burst option, right? Because this game, damage over time and this game just really don't mesh well, especially at like a higher level of play where you're playing very fast, you're swapping through weapons very quickly. Taking the time to do this and like wait, just wait for it to slowly take damage, just isn't really worth it when there's so many other things you could be doing to do way more damage. So I think, personally, just like off the top of my head, right, just spitballing, that could maybe be a cool thing. Okay, my mic stopped recording audio for literally no reason whatsoever, so that's fun. But, you know, I'm just thinking, like, I'm just spitballing ways you could maybe rework this thing to make it be less situational in the campaign, but also not become, like, overpowered as balls in cyber grind, which is, I will admit, that is a tall task. That is a tall order. It's difficult. It's not easy. But you know, I think it would be better for the overall game if one of the cooler weapons, you know, this thing, was actually like not the most situational thing in the video game. I think that would be cool. I think that would be pretty awesome, personally. Again, I'm also incredibly biased because I like this thing. I have like an ulterior motive for making it good. But yeah, you know, maybe more fuel in the tank would be cool, and it like give it more fuel and then make it spit out the fuel faster. Maybe, I don't know. So then you can just get more oil down on more things, perhaps. Maybe that could be a good idea. Again, I don't know. I'm not the guy who would be hypothetically buffing it, am I? Throwing things into the void because it makes for an interesting topic of conversation. And that's the only real thing I am providing here. Get it. But yeah, that works. I can't be the only person who thinks this way though. Like, surely there are other people who are like, yeah, the fire starter's cool. I want to see it like be a good weapon. But yeah, that's kind of all I really have to say about this thing. I'm gonna be honest. I've said my piece. Got no more to give. Other than this explosion. See, look at it's so weak, man. Back in my day, that would have killed. God damn it. Anyway. Buff Firestarter, please. Thanks, Akita. That'd be really cool.